Hello everyone, welcome to On Purpose Astrology. I'm Mandy Lockley, and today we're going to be looking at the chart for the lunar eclipse in Taurus, identifying some of the themes of the eclipse more generally, and also taking a little quick look at the chart for Israel, because that eclipse has some quite profound connections to the chart for the country of Israel. As we know, it's a country and a region in crisis at the moment. Before we dive into all of that, just a couple of updates. Just to say thank you for your loyalty in watching these videos, really appreciate it. There's been a longer than usual gap between videos. The reason being is because I had a bit of a cold, so I was resting up and I didn't really want to be on camera sort of coughing and sneezing. It's not a great look. When I recovered, then it was time to go to an astrology conference, and a residential conference. The first time in about 4 years I've been to a residential astrology conference. It was amazing for obvious reasons. I've been doing things online. It's been amazing to reconnect with my community, to catch up with old friends, and as always with these events, to meet and make new friends as well. And it reminded me how amazing it is to have community. Online community has been brilliant, and we know it's been a lifesaver for so many people and for our work as well. But to meet people in person and have that sense of community has been, as I said, amazing. Talking of conferences, a reminder that the Academy of Astrology UK online conference is going to be on the 1st of December. If you are interested and haven't booked, I will put the link in the description below, so that you can just have a little browse, see if there's anything you fancy. It's really good value. You'll get a whole evening plus 2 full days of astrology, of talks by top-notch astrologers. I'm doing a talk on minor aspects, the minor connections, so-called minor connections, and how they can be quite profound and show up quite strongly in relationships. So that's going to be a really interesting one. And you can watch everything live as it happens. So you can ask questions to the astrologers, or you can watch them all afterwards online, watch the recordings online. So you get the opportunity to see everything. I think you get the recordings for a few weeks. I think it's at least 4 weeks, but it might even be a couple of months. And just also to let you know, you might have seen I started a series of videos on life purpose themes for the sun signs: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. Because I had to take a break, I didn't get around to completing that. I'm going to be working on that. So if your sun sign hasn't been covered yet, over the next week or so, I will hope to get those videos up so you can find out what Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, etc., etc. is. One more thing before we get into the eclipse is, again, I've been having a break from consultations because I've been completing a book project I've been working on for quite a while. I wanted to focus on that, and then I got ill and I had to rest. But my diary is now open again for consultations. If you are interested in a private consultation, onpurposeastrology.com is my website. My details are on there of what I offer in terms of consultations. I do them all on Zoom, anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world. And you can contact me via my website to book, or to ask questions, or to inquire if you need any more details. So let's go straight in now to this eclipse. It's an eclipse in Taurus, and I'll just show the chart. Here we go. Here we go. So it's a lunar eclipse in Taurus, which means the moon is in Taurus. A lunar eclipse is a full moon. Now, we know full moons are a culmination. They're quite intense. It's a culmination of a process. You can see things coming to light. The eclipse, of course, makes things dark because it's eclipse. So things go dark, but then afterwards things come to light. So think of the word culmination as a key word for a lunar eclipse. Think also of relationship is also a key word for a lunar eclipse, because it's a full moon, it's moon opposite sun. It, of course, relates, I mean, everything relates to relationships. Everything is about relationships ultimately, but there's a specific focus on relationships, and a more intense focus on relationships with a eclipsed full moon, which is what this is. It's in the sign of Taurus, the moon is. So it puts the focus on the axis of Taurus and Scorpio. Taurus and Scorpio are naturally signs that are opposites, they're opposite each other. So they have things in common and they have things of difference as well. So let's explore some of the themes of Scorpio and Taurus. Now, if you want to know where this eclipse touches your chart, you can just look at where 5 degrees of Taurus and 5 degrees of Scorpio falls in your chart, what house. As I've said before, and as I'm sure many of you know, most of you know, the houses describe the areas of life where the planetary energies express themselves. If you don't know what houses in your chart are Taurus or Scorpio, you can get a free chart at astro.com, for example. So you look where Taurus is in your chart, what house it is in, and where Scorpio is in each house, and then you can see the area of life that this eclipse will fall in. You may find it falls on an angle, you know, which is the beginning of house 1, 7, 4, or 10, and you may find that it falls on a planet in your chart as well. If you're not sure the meanings of the houses, I've got a video, the video that I did for the supermoon in Aries in September. At the end of that video, I think it's about 11 or so minutes in, I do a brief description of the houses, what the meanings of all the houses in the chart. So I will pop that link in the description as well, in case you you need some support on understanding what the houses are. As I said, I'm sure most of you have a basic understanding, and I know there are some professional astrologers as well that watch this, so hello to you too. Okay, so Taurus and Scorpio. Well, it's an axis about attachment and desire. What does that mean? Well, as fixed signs, both are fixed signs, they seek to accumulate, to gather, to accumulate things, whether that's material possessions, wealth, emotional experiences, relationships, people. They accumulate what they desire and they become attached. There's an attachment process there with these fixed signs, which makes it difficult to let go of what you have accumulated. Let go, you know, to sort of, you know, to spend the money, or to worry about that you're not going to have more money coming if you spend the money that you've got, or if you let go of a relationship or lose a relationship, not wanting to let it go because of that worry that you might not have another relationship, for example. Fiercely loyal. I mean, that's one of the fantastic qualities about the fixed signs. So Taurus and Scorpio, once you've got their trust, particularly with Scorpio, once you've got their trust and they have invited you into their inner circle, they will be your friend for life, as long as you don't betray them, because they might hold a grudge. They might cut you off. I've known Scorpios and Tauruses to do that when someone has really upset them, but it kind of takes a lot, because there's that trust there, and that trust is earned. A reputation for being stubborn. All the fixed signs have a reputation for being stubborn. And they find it hard. They can find it hard. Unless there's other things in the chart, plenty of mutable stuff, they can find it hard to deal with change. I mean, a lot of humans, most humans find it difficult to deal with change, particularly when change is seen as taking something away from you. But it can be particularly hard for the fixed signs. So as I said, you might not have Taurus planets or Scorpio planets in your chart, but look to the houses in your chart where Taurus and Scorpio fall, which will give you some idea of where there might be areas of life where you might find it more difficult to deal with change, where there might be attachment, where there might be desires and things to, you know, to accumulate things, whether it's emotional or physical. So Taurus is about the physical body. It's an earth sign, the physical and material life. That's why Taurus is said to love money, and like it's one of the things Taurus likes to accumulate. And it's not necessarily greed, it's about wanting to feel secure. Both of these signs, they want to feel secure. Both signs tend to cling onto their long-held beliefs, values, as well as their possessions, the things that they actually physically possess. But There can be possessiveness with other people emotionally as well with these two signs. It's hard for them to let go of their ideas, their beliefs, their values once they have been set. They are often feel like they're set in stone. Back to Taurus, it's ruled by Venus. So what does Venus like? What does Taurus like? Peace, comfort, security. It's very sensual. Whereas Scorpio is all about its desires, its deep feelings, it's emotional, it's a water sign. So what it desires is that deep intensity of feeling. Certainly with both of these signs, when change comes, and this is what eclipses do tend to bring, do tend to describe or suggest, is change. Not immediately change always, but the process of change. When they come into the fixed signs, when they come into the fixed signs, these eclipses, that change, whether it's in your personal life or, as I said, in the world, it can feel like the meeting of the irresistible force and the immovable object. And what happens? Well, there's much resistance, and when the pressure builds up, change then can be quite drastic, explosive even. But as I said, eclipses herald change, and they are long processes. We don't expect, although it might have something might happen on the actual eclipse. We don't usually expect something to happen on the actual eclipse. What happens is sometimes with eclipses points, and then when other planets go to the eclipse point later on, even months later, then you can see triggers and those repetitive themes, those themes coming back and things happening. That's very much the process of an eclipse. So eclipses are about endings, endings for new beginnings. And we've already talked about the fixed signs, finding it hard to let go. So knowing where you find it hard to let go can be one of the first steps in helping you to, well, to sort of adjust to any changes that come into your life. Sometimes the changes come because things need to change to regain some stability, almost that loss of stability in various places in life, various perhaps relationships or work, or depending on where this eclipse falls in your chart, what it might represent. It could be health if it's the 6th house or the 12th house, for example. It can be work if it's the 10th house, etc. Relationships, 7th house, etc. And so on and so forth. Money if it's the 2nd house, for example. Knowing where you do tend to cling on to things, generally speaking, where it's hard to let go, where it's hard to sort of surrender to inevitability of change, is key to, making this process perhaps a little bit easier. It might be easier for you if you have lots of mutables in your charts. The mutable signs are Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces and Gemini, for example. If you've got those in your chart coming up quite strongly, then change is a little bit more, there's a little bit more flexibility and adaptability to change there. Now, if you look at house 5, you'll see the sun in Scorpio there, next to Mercury in Scorpio and Mars in Scorpio. Now, Mars in Scorpio is our friend in this eclipse chart. It's strong in Scorpio. You want Mars in Scorpio around if there's a crisis going on. It's good in a crisis. It can be incredibly courageous and a master of self-control. Mars in Scorpio will keep a secret. Mercury in Scorpio will keep a secret. Okay. They can also, though, become unforgiving if crossed. Listen carefully, I think, when we've got Mercury in Scorpio. Listen carefully for yourself and to others. Don't waste words. Say what you mean. Be authentic in the way you express yourself. Don't say what you don't mean. Say what you do mean. It's not a time for sort of passive aggression, for example. I think the best way of using Mars and Mercury in Scorpio together is to be honest, but to be kind and compassionate. Compassion is what we need a lot of right now. Scorpio, don't forget, it's known for this kind of, I don't know, sting in the tail. It's a deeply at heart, it's a deeply compassionate sign. So be compassionate yet honest if you can. Don't give away what's not yours to give away. Look out potentially for jealousy or subterfuge in relationships, to secrets spilling or secrets being kept or information being held from you that might come to light eventually. Again, about being honest, but about keeping not secrets, but respecting other people's privacy and not getting involved in other people's crises, in other people's messes, for example. So you look at house 11 here in this chart and you will see that the moon is in a fairly wide conjunction. It's next to Jupiter, also in Taurus. So what Jupiter touches, Jupiter is known as a planet of optimism. It's known as a planet of sort of good luck and opportunity. That's true. But it's also, it exaggerates and blows up and inflates everything that it touches. So think of the positive things that we've talked about, the courage and the honesty, and but then also think about, you know, the more negative things that might blow up with Jupiter also in Taurus. Jupiter in Taurus is very much about meaning, our beliefs, as we've already talked about, holding on, clinging on to your hard earned and hard fought for beliefs and ideas, and faith. It's about faith as well. It's about spiritual faith and religious faith, for example. Jupiter brings that into the mix also. It can also bring the theme of money and finances, Jupiter in Taurus. And I think this whole sort of complex here with, you know, if we look at all the things in house 11 and house 5, moon and Jupiter, and then Sun, Mercury and Mars. It can be about who holds the power in a relationship. Just talked about money and possessions and money and wealth, etc., in terms of one of the themes of Taurus and Scorpio. It's often the person in a relationship who has the money or the control of the money or the wealth or the assets is the one who holds the power in relationships. So that's something to think about. Who holds the power in your relationships? Is it you? Do you need to have power over someone else based on what you can bring to the relationship? Is that a true relationship where you might think that the other person only wants you because you've got loads of money, or vice versa? Remember, at heart, at its essence, Taurus and Scorpio is about security, and in a relationship both parties need to feel secure. So perhaps that's another thing to think about during this eclipse. Where is the security? We're talking not just security in money, but emotionally secure as well. To be feeling safe in your relationship, to be able to access that deep intimacy that's available with Scorpio, with that sensuality and comfort and naturalness and earthiness that comes very easily to Taurus. So perhaps it's asking you to appreciate the beauty of life, take comfort in those simple things. As we've discussed, it also helps, I think this Jupiter also helps us here to bring the perspective. Jupiter does exaggerate, but it also sees the bigger perspective. What's the bigger picture here? Pragmatism. Okay, reality. What's the reality? What's the pragmatism? What's the pragmatic thing to do? Or what's the reality of that situation? It goes back to Mercury in Scorpio. Mercury's about being honest with others. It's also not lying to yourself. Looking at the bigger picture, Jupiter can help you with that and not overreact if things get a bit icky or crisisy, for example. Now you'll see I have highlighted Pluto here in the seventh house. Seventh house is relationships. As I say, don't worry about it's not going to be in the seventh house for everybody. This is just for the chart for London. And the reason I've highlighted it, it's not making a exact square with the moon and the sun. I mean, it's very wide square, but it's still traveling in concert with the lunar nodes. And I've been talking about the square of Pluto to the lunar nodes, which are, as you can see, house 5, you've got the south node in Libra, and house 11, you've got the north node in Aries. They've been traveling for a while now and will for a good month or so, continuing traveling in a square with the nodes. I talk a lot about the nodal square to Pluto in the video for the solar eclipse that we had on the 14th of October. Have a little look at that video if you haven't already seen it, or have a relook at it. As I said, you remember the effects of both of these eclipses will be felt for the months to come. So it's worth sort of, reminding yourself of some of the themes. But in essence, it's about power in relationships, this Pluto with the nodes at the moment. As I talked about in the solar eclipse video, it's the I am, who am I, North Node in Aries, versus who are we? Who am I as an individual, and who am I in relationship, in a we? I am and we are. Where is the balance? Where is the balance of power there as well? So that brings the kind of issue of power into it quite profoundly. Again, I talked in detail about Eris. You can see Eris there, 24 of Aries. The nodes are currently traveling with Eris, pretty much an exact conjunction from Eris to the North nodes. The North node is what's coming in. Eris is the goddess of disruption and chaos, who demands and compromisingly demands fairness, and ultimately is looking for peace, but she demands fairness. She will create a crisis in order to have equality and fairness come into the world. She's the sister of Mars, so she's working in accord with Mars, and she's in one of Mars's other favorite signs other than Scorpio, which is in Aries. She's the divine feminine warrior, whereas Mars is more of the sort of masculine energy warrior. Eris is the divine feminine warrior energy. I'm not talking genders here, I'm talking about that basic energies. Again, I've done a whole video on Eris, the myth and some of the themes. She represents feminism very strongly. She also represents the women, the fight, the woman's fight, which of course is feminism. She also represents paradigm shifts as well in thinkings and beliefs. We've talked about changes in beliefs and belief systems and ideas and values that might be the values that you might have that might be challenged by this eclipse, and having to think kind of deeply. Now, I just want to have a look quickly at the chart for Israel. Now, unless you haven't seen the news, you will know that there's a very big, awful crisis going on between Israel and Gaza at the moment. Now, I just want to point out a few things in this chart that seem to be relevant and interesting. I am not an expert on the politics of the Middle East, of Israel and of the region, and I don't have sides, but all I want to say here is I'm not going to analyze the chart in any great detail. I'm not going to give opinions, and I'm not going to give predictions. I don't really agree with making predictions or deep analysis without having a really deep knowledge of the history and the politics, which I don't have. But it's still interesting to look at the chart because it's astrology in action. I would also like to say that what Hamas did to Israel is absolutely unforgivable and unconscionable. My feeling, though, is that my compassion goes out deeply. My heartfelt compassion goes out very deeply to everyone who's lost their lives and is injured and displaced, and to all the families and loved ones and friends of those who have been killed or injured or displaced by this awful, awful tragedy. So let's have a quick look at the chart. Now, the first thing I'd like to point out, if you look right to the bottom of the chart in the middle, it's a double wheel chart. The chart in the middle is a chart for the founder of the State of Israel. 14th of May, 1948, 4 p.m. local time, Tel Aviv. Pluto, you can see, is very close to the IC here, the bottom of the chart, the angle which starts the fourth house. It's one of the important four angles in the chart. Okay, so the IC, what does the IC mean? Now, I'm going to use slightly different meanings for the houses here because we're looking at the chart of a country, not of an individual. This isn't personal astrology. This is world, or otherwise known as mundane astrology. So in mundane astrology, the fourth house, the angle, is about the root, the foundation on which the country was founded, on which the country the beliefs and the foundation. It's about land, and it's about a sense of belonging. Okay, so it really is the root of the matter. It's what Israel stands for, what it was, the values it was founded upon, okay, which was to have a safe and secure state for Jewish people, Jewish land people. It's about land, basically, is the fourth house. The IC is in Capricorn. Capricorn is about stability. So it is about having that stable home, that stable place to belong, to call home. Conservative with a small c. Capricorn is conservative with a small c. It's also about strong leadership as well. Now, the 10th house in a chart for a country is about the leadership, the government, the person in charge, or the people in charge. So the fourth house, by definition of being opposition, is often about the opposition parties, or, you know, the opposition parties, basically. Now, you can see that Pluto is very close. Pluto has finished its exact conjunctions with that IC angle, but it's still very close. So it's long processes. Pluto brings long processes. And so we can see here, we can see a crisis that kind of shakes the very foundations of what Israel was founded upon, which is very reflective of what's happening at the moment in Israel. It can be about things that are hidden, subterfuge, things that sort of explode into the world, which we have seen about 11, 12 days ago with what Hamas did with its attack on Israel, which is violence, of course, can be violent. Pluto brings change, issues of power and empowerment, issues of land boundaries as well. And I think that says a lot, you know, that land boundaries is a lot of what, by my understanding, what some of the issues are here. Land boundaries, I say that because Capricorn and boundaries, it's a Saturn ruled sign. I've already talked about briefly that Pluto is in a T-square with the lunar nodes. You'll see on this chart that the lunar nodes are angular, i.e. the south node falls on the ascendant of the Israel chart, and the north node falls on the descendant with Eris there as well. I've just talked about some of those themes when I was looking at the chart generally, but to say a little bit more on that, it basically brings this north node, south node, Pluto, Eris, T-square into focus. It makes it more prominent. Okay, and I think we can see that. If we look at the eclipse itself, you will see that the moon in Taurus falls in the 7th house, of the chart for Israel. Moon there, you can see that. So what does the moon stand for in a chart for a country, for example? What does it signify? Well, it signifies the people, public opinion, the population in general, women perhaps in particular as well. It can be about unrest. It can be about resources, particularly in Taurus, food and water supplies, which again has been an issue that's been making the news, of course. And it makes a T-square. You can see there at the top of the chart in the 10th house that Israel has the moon in the 10th house in its natal chart. So you've got that double moon, a double whammy of the moon, that moon energy. Those things I've talked about, the population, the people, because this is affecting the people. This conflict is affecting the people. These very, very human stories. The 7th house, where the eclipse falls, is the house in mundane astrology, in world astrology. It's the house of open enemies. Open enemies, isn't that interesting? It's also the house of diplomacy, accord, partnership, allies, and foreign affairs in general. So you can see why I wanted to put this chart up, because foreign affairs, this is, you know, there is, it's not just a conflict between two parties, it brings together lots of other countries in the world, you know, foreign affairs in general, you know. We can also see, if you look at in house 8, you can see that Uranus transiting, so on that the outside chart, transiting Uranus is about to make conjunctions. It's about to conjunct the sun of Israel in this chart. So what does Uranus bring? Uranus brings shocks, surprises, dramatic changes. You know, change we talked about in the last video, when change comes for fixed signs, because it's a fixed sign thing, isn't it? You've got Venus in Taurus, the sun in Taurus in the 8th house for Israel, with Uranus in Taurus. Uranus is the, you know, one of the gods of change. There's a really brilliant book by Howard Supportus that if you're into psychological astrology, I would heartily recommend it. It's about the transits of Pluto, we've already just talked about, Uranus and Neptune, and it's called The Gods of Change. So they are, Uranus and Pluto are the gods of change. There's lots of other things going on in the chart here as well, but I haven't got time to sort of go through all of them. But Uranus and Pluto are two of the gods of change, and the subtitle for this book is Pain, Crisis, and the transits of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And I think we can definitely see pain and crisis unfolding here in this chart. Now, Uranus hasn't made its exact conjunction to the sun yet, but it's close enough to be in orbit, it's close enough to having an effect. But we've got a long time, they've got a long time in Israel of having Uranus to its sun. It's going to be in orb really from this summer just gone through to spring 2025. These outer planets transits are slow, they are long processes. So change, we know that change, it's all about change. Change has come, change is coming, changes are coming. It's happening in the 8th house. What does the 8th house mean in mundane astrology when you're looking at the chart for country? Well, generally speaking, it's about money and taxes and inheritances and national debt and insurance, and also financial relationships with other countries. So there's talk of aid and support for Israel and for Gaza at the moment. That's some of the talks that are going on, the humanitarian aid, for example. It's also, which is interesting, the 8th house also speaks of enemies in the time of war. If you remember, I said 7th house is your open enemies, and we know who Israel's open enemies are, but it's enemies, your enemies in the time of war, and there's no doubt that it is a war that is going on. Sadly, also, it talks about mortality rates as well. You know, death and mortality. It's the house, the 8th house is the house of death and taxes, as we know. So it's not really surprising. I mean, it is surprising. It's surprising and shocking and incredibly distressing and incredibly distressing for all people concerned, even people who are just watching the news who don't have any, you know, don't have any connection to any party involved in this awful conflict. So, as I said at the beginning, I just want to express my compassion for all the loss and for all the fear and for all the awful things that have happened. Just to finish, just to one thing to say is that the 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 eclipse here, as I say, it makes a T-square with the moon in the 10th house in the chart of Israel. Israel will always have moon in the 10th house because this is its chart. So let's think about the people, the population, the people who are really affected by that, and really sort of give our heartfelt compassion, even though we might feel terribly powerless. Moon in the 10th house in a mundane chart, the chart for a country, is about leadership. It's about the government. It's about the country. So you can see that it is a crisis in government, it is a crisis for the country, but ultimately it's a crisis for the people, not just for people, the Israelis, but also for the Palestinians who are also involved in this. It's really awful. I'm going to end it there. I hope this has been interesting. I hope it's been useful. As I say, go back and look at some of the things I taught when I looked at the general chart for the eclipse. You'll see lots of themes there that you can follow, that are following through and that are coming out in the world, but also in your own personal lives, perhaps as well, if it touches your chart profoundly. I'm sending much love to all of you for listening, and as always, please subscribe if you enjoyed this, and thank you very much for following this channel. And I hope the eclipse season is kind to you and continues to be kind to you. Lots of love as always. Thank you. Bye-bye.